know that we are in the middle of the high holy days and they are a bit exhausting. Colorado's been also interesting, very, very hot weather. It's going to be in the 90s today, and this day last year it was in the 30s and snowing. So we're dealing with the heat and also just a lot of smoke. So a bit tiring here, but things are going well, and I hope you are well wherever you are. The traditional greeting for this time of year is to wish you a good year, and may you be written for life. Not a happy year, a good year, a rich year, and not in terms of money, but in terms of personal fulfillment. Whether you're Jewish or not, a lovely tradition is to cut up an apple and dip it in honey and share that with somebody you love and wish each other just that fullness of a year. So if you are tuning in, and it is now 11, so now like I officially start, if you're tuning in, this is the Dr. Elisa Show on KUHS Denver, the stream, my favorite radio station, and obviously is yours too because you're out there. I want to just give the producer a chance. As you know, we launch on over 40 platforms, and we are an international station. And so I'm just going to chat for a few minutes. I do have an amazing guest, and I want to get to her fairly quickly. But before we do, I just want to make sure you know who I am and where you are. So again, the Dr. Elisa Show. The conversations have definitely, over the last several weeks, been about your soul's journey. And we're going to continue that this week. Next, in 2 weeks, just so you know, I have one of my dear friends on who's an author also, Joanne Greenberg, who wrote I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. And so the conversation is going to continue in this way. You know how you can contact me if you're interested. I actually do consulting work. I do private sessions with individuals. I use astrology and my PhD in psychology. And you know how to contact me, right? You can find me at elisarobin.com. You can find me here at KUHS Denver. You can find me at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on LinkedIn. You can find me on Amazon for this book, The Way of the Well. Also, Pirate Wisdom. And fingers crossed, very soon, my third book, Dark Fire, but everything's been going a little slow with that. In case things are going slow in your life, just be aware 5 planets are retrograde, so hey, things are a little strange out there. Remember that the tagline for the show is inspiring a renaissance of spirit. And the people I bring on to have conversations with, not interviews. Let's be really clear. These are not rehearsed. These are not me just asking questions. These are heartfelt conversations. And I bring people on who have inspired me in some way. Feel free to comment. If you go to Facebook and you go to the Dr. Elisa Show on Facebook, you will find that we are there live, and you can make comments there. So today, I want to bring on a guest who so inspired me. I haven't told her the story of how she inspired me. I heard her being interviewed. Her name, just so you know, is Michal Oshman. And I heard her interviewed, I think it was maybe a short, like half-hour interview, about a book she wrote. What would you do if you weren't afraid? And to begin with, she's beautiful. But I was very just engaged with this very short interview. I bought the book, and I took it on a vacation I was on with a girlfriend. I have a friend that we travel together almost every year. We skipped one, obviously, but every summer. And every day, every morning, I would wake up early and read a chapter or 2 of this book. And my girlfriend would get up, and she would say, what was the book about today? And I would tell her, and we spent the rest of the day talking around those concepts. So not only did she inspire me, she inspired my friend, and I hope she inspires you. Michal, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Gosh, it's just humbling listening to you, and I will do my best to share my personal story and the discoveries that I made, and hopefully the listeners and the viewers will find it meaningful.
I am sure they will. So let um, I don't I like to introduce people, as you've noticed, by saying here's how they've inspired me. But as opposed to their resume, because I want you to tell us the part about your life journey from your perspective that led you to the place of writing this book. Can you just talk about your journey?
Yes, absolutely. And I know sometimes people, especially in a radio show, they kind of like, who is this person? Like, where do I place them? What box can I put them in?
Okay.
And even though the last thing I want to do is box people or myself in any box. But I'll just give a bit of, I guess, dry resume. So my name is Michal Oshman, and it's not many people can say Michal, so thank you for pronouncing my name so well. I'm originally from Israel. And I live in London. I've been living in London for almost 20 years with my family. I'm married with 4 children. I live in North London, and I wrote this book, and I'm in my mid 40s, and I wrote this book because, and I know it sounds like a cliche, but because this book had to be written. I felt deep inside I had a story to share of a discovery that I made, and even though I don't see myself as a kind of typical author, I have also a day job. I work for TikTok. Once I discovered what I call in the book the Jewish wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
and the brilliant Jewish wisdom that helps anyone and everyone that wants to grow, regardless of their faith and what they believe in and how they live their life and what they eat or what they do. This is a not religious book. This is a self-help book, but it does really is based on the foundation of the Jewish wisdom from thousands of years ago. So that is the background. So the book is a combination of sharing my personal journey with living a very everyday life, I guess, but discovering and growing and overcoming my mental health challenges thanks to understanding the Jewish wisdom.
I wonder. So thank you, and I wonder if one of the reasons your book is so powerful, and we're going to talk about the book, is your incredible honesty in the book, and I'm saying that because it seems like Buddhism is sort of the universal. Everybody can read Buddhism, and we all find wisdom. But as soon as we say Jewish wisdom, people think it's going to be a bunch of rules and I don't know, whatever. And in your book, you're so transparent and honest. And I wonder if that's one of the reasons you feel that your book has been so well received.
I think there's different ways. I think there's different reasons, and thank you for asking. First of all, there are not many books that talk about Judaism in a non-religious way. And there are not many books that talk about the beautiful wisdom in Judaism that are not written, or stories that are not told by rabbis or by people that represent religion. So I think it's quite, new, and hopefully will become more and more of a trend where people, anyone and everyone, see the Jewish wisdom as a wisdom that almost hasn't been discovered as an ism, right? Because as you said, people consider Buddhism and Taoism and other brilliant wisdoms, but for some reason Judaism is always getting that shelf of the religious shelf rather than the spiritual and self-help shelf. And that's why I'm so passionate about really sharing this message with the world.
And I'm so glad you're on the show to do that. Let me start. I've now read your book 3 times, just so you know. And I'd love to start, if it's okay, with a little bit of your young history. And so you were the grandchild of Holocaust survivors. I am the grandchild of people who got out, family who got out just before and then lost family in the Holocaust. And so there's a haunting story always behind that. You grew up in Israel during a very difficult time in terms of personal safety. And I'm wondering if that life experience pushed you deeper into a discovery, a need for meaning and purpose?
Mm. So, we never know, right? We live our life and we assume, like, this is it, and it is. I think that it definitely affected me to be raised, that I was raised by my grandparents from both sides who were Holocaust survivors, but specifically my grandmother Hannah, who I write about in the book. My grandmother Hannah was on the train on the way to Auschwitz, and she felt, in her essence, what many felt, that something bad was about to happen, and she was lucky to be able to take action and push herself out of the train and fall and save her life, and through that, save her life and grow a family after, and give birth to my aunt and to my mother. But she was post-traumatized, as were most of my family. So most of my early days were hearing difficult Holocaust stories from her, and she felt this obligation of prepping me for what she said this would happen again. So I'm sure that really injects anxiety and fear. And as you said, I was growing up in Israel in a very difficult time, and my father was the head forensic pathologist of Israel, so I really saw death and difficult side of life from a very young age, and I thought for many years that that's why I was very anxious, and I went to therapy for most of my life, thinking that therapy and medication is the only thing that can really help deal with anxiety that I was experiencing.
And then you found another way. And so I'd kind of like to reframe it. You are the grandchild of courage and honesty, right? In those stories, and that's what I see feel in your book. I'd like to dive into your book a bit, if that's okay. And so I've got all these pages marked. I want to start, if it's okay, with this notion, because this travels through your book, and just so you know, I want to end with this too, that we are a flame. I have never heard our life journey explained that way. Can you dig into that a little bit more for us?
I think this, as I said, I was brought up in Israel, Jewish, and obviously, I was very clear about that side of my identity, but I never connected to the spiritual side of Judaism, and many do not. By the way, they don't, like you said, right? We're not aware of it, and therefore, when I discovered that I had a soul, that I have a soul. I never knew I had a soul. My life, the way I was brought up, was very, if you can't prove it, it's non-existent. If I was brought up by a professor in medicine. It was all about facts and figures and everything that could be measured, and there was not much spirituality, or no spirituality in the house. I think it is also quite typical, and I know I'm generalizing, with second and third generation Holocaust, that the mindset in the house was on survival rather than on anything else, right? And so when I was going to therapy for all these years, I was looking for answers, and most of the time my therapist took me to my childhood, to the things that happened to me, to the things that my parents did or didn't do to me. And thank God they didn't do anything deliberately. They just, like every parent, they did their best, and they got some stuff wrong, as I do as a mother as well. And at some point there was so much blame and going backwards, but I knew that the answers to my searching wouldn't come from the therapy room. Like intuitively, I felt that I maximized what I could get from the therapy room. And then when I discovered Chassidut, which is spiritual Judaism, and I discovered that there is a soul. Now you have to, it's one's decision if they want to take this leap of faith and connect with that something that I think instinctively many of us feel inside, right? How many people that I ask, do you think you have a soul? And they're like, yeah, for sure. And what's your soul all about? What's the story? No, I have no idea, right? Like someone. So we can, the soul is something that instinctively we know that we're not just flesh and blood and that material side, but that other thing we often. We don't ask a lot about it. We don't wonder about it unless we're invited to. So when I realized that based on the Jewish wisdom, our soul is this spark, this it's a godly, it's a part of us that we carry inside, and it's a flame. And like a flame, it wants to go up. It wants to grow. It's pulling itself up. We always want to grow. It was so reassuring to know that I also, even though I had the worst thoughts in my head and dark places in my mind, to realize that inside me there is a soul that would never get damaged, that whatever I've been through was never touched in a negative way, and this soul wants to grow. And that was a huge discovery to make at the age of 38, 7 years ago.
The image of that is so profound. And as I said, I'm sharing this book with a girlfriend I'm on vacation with. And that became one of our conversation points for the entire week. That we're a flame, and that we're trying to reach up, but we can't leave the candle, let's say, right? We're trying to do that. So the imagery was so powerful. Now you link that in your book to Mitzrayim, to narrow places, to boundaries. What have you discovered about that connection between the flame of our soul and those boundaries?
So one of the beautiful things in discovering of the Jewish wisdom is all these festivals that we have in Judaism. They're spiritual moments, even though often we celebrate them in a more practical way. The food that is served on the table, and don't get me wrong, I am a foodie, and I'm just recovering from Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, from all that we had to eat and drink. But we often think about, or many of us are not aware that these celebrations, that you would see a beautiful table and beautiful selection of foods and different traditions and rituals. Behind these rituals, there's a story, there is a message, there is meaning, there is a lesson for us, and that's why we celebrate these events every year again and again, to remind ourselves that we're going on a journey, and a similar journey people have been going on for thousands of years. People have been anxious for thousands of years. People have been jealous for thousands of years. People have been in pain and emotional pain for thousands of years. That's unfortunately the only way we evolve as people and souls. So one of the beautiful discoveries was on the celebration of Passover, of Pesach, of Passover. And I always knew that Pesach was about cleaning. And not the fun side of cleaning, like, frantically, hysterically cleaning, not really one. And what I learned is this cleaning, it's not about making us anxious, oh my gosh, we're going to leave a crumb of, breadcrumb in a corner. This cleaning is a welcome, it's a trigger, it's just a way, and when I say trigger, I mean a positive trigger, it's a way to get us doing some internal cleaning. Because Passover is all about freedom. It's all about setting ourselves free. So yes, we celebrate and we remember us get freed from Egypt, from slavery. But we also remind ourselves that we're enslaving ourselves as well, with our own ego, with our own thoughts, with things that we're not letting go of. So, there's a saying, God can get us out of Egypt, but he can't get Egypt out of ourselves if we are not helping ourselves.
Right. I love the humor in your book, that you talk about Adam, the first man, and Eve, and humans are designed to make mistakes, and imagine the pressure. You're the first two humans on the planet, you make a huge mistake, imagine the pressure. I love the way you put humor. Your personality shows up in the book. It's absolutely amazing.
It's the biggest mess up. They got this everything, the plants, the trees, the fruit, the vegetables, they're naked. They don't even know that they're naked, right? They're feeling so good. They have everything. And they go and they choose from that one single thing that they have been asked not to do.
Right. And what a teenage thing to do, right? Of course, they're going to do that. So, but I just love that humans are actually designed to make mistakes. And so stop beating ourselves up that we're making mistakes. That's the narrow place we keep ourselves in, right?
That was huge discovery for someone that grew up for perfectionism. And I'm sure that so many of our listeners and our audience, like, we grew up in homes when, our biggest fear was to mess up, right? Our biggest fear was to disappoint our parents, to get something wrong. Many of us want to please, to always get it right. And when we fail, we feel that it's horrible. It's disastrous. It's like we're breaking from inside. So just learning that the first man, the perfect man, the prototype, that person too messed up on his first day. Is kind of reassuring, because then you understand that we weren't designed to be perfect.
Right.
We were designed to try, to correct ourselves, to make a mistake, to bounce back. And one of the beautiful things about Judaism, it's all about bouncing back.
Yes, both spiritually and historically. It's all about bouncing back. Do you think, and if I'm jumping and it doesn't make sense, please tell me, but you spend a bit of time, and I loved this part, talking about needing to empty ourselves to be to find our meaning. So that existential vacuum that Viktor Frankl talked about was not that we were too empty. It was that we were too full. And some of it, I'm sure, is of anxiety and angst and self-blame. But you go into detail about emptying. I found that fascinating. Can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. And you know that I'm a big, I would say, fan of Viktor Frankl, and obviously his book, Man's Search for Meaning. I think once you read this, small physically but huge emotionally and mentally book, and this book changed people's lives.
It definitely changed mine, so yes.
Yeah, it's a life changer. You just look at life and you look at hope and you look at meaning in a completely different way. And just for any listener that is not familiar with Viktor Frankl wrote about his experiences as a doctor, as a neurologist and psychiatrist in Auschwitz, and how through his observations from the years that he was in different camps, how he discovered what was really motivating people to keep on life, when really did they have anything to live for. Right. And he was there in those moments when people ran towards the end, or people just found it impossible to want to breathe, take even one more breath. And what Viktor Frankl discovered is actually what a person needs to continue their life and want to live and grow. What we need is meaning. And meaning in life doesn't mean, this big capital M, or today we use the word purpose. It's not this purpose, you have to be a CEO or start this big company or be on a big stage. Meaning can be to continue life because you love someone. Meaning can be that you want to live because you know that you want to do something meaningful in this world for someone else, right? So he discovered that this intrinsic discovery of meaning really gives people this wish, this will, this motivation, to live. And he talks about, and he only passed away, I think, in the late, I think it was just before 2000 that he passed. And what he discovered in his late years is actually that there's this existential vacuum that he's discovering within his patients, that many of his patients are just, expressing these feelings of depression and deep anxiety and finding it very hard to live and to live a joyous, meaningful life. But actually, from his point of view, many of these cases, not all of them, were actually people suffering from existential vacuum, from this emptiness, from this, what am I waking up in the morning for? And his treatment for them was actually logotherapy, which is therapy of meaning, really helping them discover what is meaningful for you, what matters to you, and then what can you do about it. And that is fascinating, because also within Chassidut and with the beautiful Jewish wisdom, there's this concept of, you know, what are you filling yourself with, and how can you empty yourself to this, you know, empty yourself, yes, in the religious way to allow God inside, but in a spiritual way to allow meaningful things to go into your, in Hebrew it's kli, into your container, into your essence. And I realized that in my life, I filled myself with lots of stuff that just took space.
Yeah, and not the stuff that fills you emotionally, perhaps. You explain that so well. What struck me and strikes me over and over again about Jewish wisdom and spirituality is Judaism is a paradox. You have a vacuum, but in order to fill it, you have to empty it.
Yes.
Right? And Judaism is full of paradox like that. I often wonder if that's why we walk away from it young and come back to it later, because it takes a bit of understanding. We have to be a little older, perhaps. Do you think?
I mean, for anyone that can see me now, I'm nodding. I am fascinated by what could appear and come across as tensions, or as you said, these, you know, these conflicts, these like, it feels like completely contradicting, like, you know, how, but actually I'm mostly fascinated by these, what could appear as internal tensions and paradoxes, as you say, within the wisdom. I think life is full of those, right? In order to grow, you need to take less of something, right?
Yes.
In order to, and I think what it also does, it helps you become more self-aware. It really, you know, a different self-aware. There's one self-awareness that I experienced in the therapy room, which is being able to ask questions, being able to be curious about, oh, I went on this coaching session and I felt something. And then I left the coaching session, I know you know this very well, and I felt something different. Who do these feelings belong to? Are they mine? Were they projected from the client? You know, what is this? You know, all of these kind of more psychodynamic kind of wondering. Kind of, that's one school of thought. And then, as you said, that there's this spiritual school of thought that actually allows you to live with this conflict inside you. And listen, one of our greatest internal conflicts is between, you know, between the good and the bad that we carry inside us. And I don't like the translation of like bad inclination, because it's like, or even evil inclination. I think it's just not translated, you know, from Hebrew to English, you know, well, and I don't think we've cracked that yet. But we have these two forces inside of us. They're in constant battle, right? The part of us which is egoless and wants to do for others and is a giving and kind. And that part of us which also has, you know, a role to play, which is more egocentric, which is more selfish, which is sometimes wants to do not great things. And how we were designed with these two forces. And I think if people knew that this was the plan.
Yes. What is that? I'm sure you've heard this. That everyone should carry two bits of paper in their pocket, and one should say, "The entire world was made for you," and the other should say, "You are but ashes and dust."
Love that. Right. It's a beautiful practical way to do like self-work on exactly what we've been talking about, emptying yourself from yourself when there's too much of yourself, you know, not letting others or not letting, you know, caring for others in potentially, and that is this message of, you know, and this is how the story goes, that every person should have two notes, a note in each pocket. By the way, I have two notes on my desk always. One pocket should say, I'll say this in Hebrew, Ha'olam nivra avuri. The world was created for me. That message is a very strong message. It's a true message that the world, because we're each a whole wide world, just by ourselves, your one soul is a whole world. You must remind yourself that this world was created for you to shine, for you to thrive, for you to do those meaningful things that you arrived to this world to do. And those are the cases when sometimes, I'll tell you from my experience, when I'm about to launch a new idea or program, or I'm about to present, I was like, do you know what, Michal? This is your moment. The world was created for you. You are now standing on this stage and you are owning it, right? And like, this is my moment. And that's one note. But then in the other pocket, you should always hold a different note that says, Anochi afar ve'efel, which is, as you said, I'm just dust and ashes. It's not dust and, it's godly dust and ashes, right? It's spiritual dust and ashes. But it means that I'm not in the center of attention. I have a side role to play. I'm here for someone else. I am, this is a metaphor, of course, of dust and ashes. And that gives us perspective. That we are part of something much bigger that, by the way, we can't grasp. We don't know what we're really part of. We can only see a very small part of life, of course. But that note is the note that I take out when I have to contain my ego, when I have to tame myself, when I remind myself that I'm here to serve either another cause or another person. I'm here to make something else or someone else shine. And I use that as well. I use that at work, when I want just the focus to be on my team, when I want to be only in the background, when with my children, I'm just here to help them grow. So those two notes are a very practical way to facilitate life moments.
So if you've just joined us, you are listening to the Dr. Elisa Show on KUHS Denver, the stream. You're going to have to check the first half of the show because you missed it. You'll be able to find it on the Dr. Elisa Show Facebook stream. You'll be able to find it on elisarobin.com. I'm talking with Michal Oshman, who wrote What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? And this is just an incredible conversation. I feel like I'm reading your book now for the fourth time, or the fifth time. I'm not sure how many times I've read it. What I'm loving is that something, and again, I've already said this, but I'm going to expand on it, or have you expand on it, that in Jewish wisdom, I find the notion of paradox more than I find it in any other spiritual tradition, and I find it so comforting because life is a paradox, and so many of our teachers and our sages have said things. So one of the others, you say this in the book, and I find this, because I love this song, Getzer Tsar Meod. My Hebrew is obviously not as good as yours. That the world is a narrow bridge, and the important thing is to not be afraid. And I love this, and partly because you talk about taking a leap of faith. And just the other day, I heard emunah, faith, defined as the taking action in the face of uncertainty. And that is in your book. You don't say those words, but it's in your book.
Yes.
Can you just delve into that a bit for us?
Absolutely. I love the image of a bridge, and this beautiful song called Gesher Tzar Meod, which means in Hebrew a very narrow bridge. It goes, the whole world is a very narrow bridge, a very narrow bridge, a very narrow bridge. And the main thing is to have no fear at all. And as you said before, Dr. Elisa, I think what it gives us is reassurance and comfort that life is full of bridges. Tall, small, wobbly, all kinds of bridges. Every time we face a bridge in life, when we are about to make a decision, when we are about to make a big change, when we choose the path of our life, and then when we maybe sometimes decide to course correct. Right. And it acknowledges the fact that often in life we're on one side of the bridge, right? And we look at the other side of the bridge. We're looking further away instinctively. Spiritually, we feel like we belong in the other side. But there's no assurances and no policies, and no one can promise you. And without taking unnecessary risk, we should consider taking action in life. So the whole idea is that if you're facing a bridge and you've considered taking that leap of faith because you feel and know, even though you don't have a guarantee that you'll get exactly what you want, maybe it's worth taking a step. First step on the bridge, even if you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. We do this all the time. We get married, we have children, we start new jobs, we decide to go on a school education, not knowing exactly if this is exactly the subject we love. We go on dance classes even though we don't know if we know how to dance. We try cooking lessons. We have to realize that we take bridges all the time, and actually empowering ourselves to continue taking those bridges in a thoughtful way with friends, if possible. So I love the fact that you share it with your friend, because crossing a bridge when you have someone with you holding your hand is often easier.
Do you find that this is embedded in all of Jewish spirituality? One, the narrow bridge. Two, we need to cross it. I'm thinking of stories, but I'm also thinking of the word ivrit.
Yes.
The word Hebrew is to cross over, isn't it?
Yep, it's from the Shorish Avar, and yes, I think it's very much embedded in the, I would say, almost, maybe I'm not using exactly the right term, forgive me here, but in the Jewish life philosophy. And this goes, 3,500 years ago, when actually, and this is how I tell the story, God was like auditioning different nations for the receiving of the Torah, and he was like, of course, this is my language. I have this Torah. I'd like it to be part of this. And many nations were just asking questions. So what is this Bible? And what is this way of life? And what does it mean exactly? And of course, this is my interpretation. Mm-hmm. And it happened to be that the Israelites, after seeing, the miracles of escaping and being saved from Egypt, they said, we'll take it. We'll take it. We'll take it. In Hebrew, it's beautiful. In Hebrew, it's Na'aseh v'nishma, which means we will do, and then we will learn, and then we will understand.
Right.
So really, it's quite encouraging to know that sometimes in life, the first step is actually doing.
Right. And I just love, I love your whole book, but so that, I think that's profoundly encouraging now in 2021, when we were all supposed to be back to some sort of normal, and normal is just very strange. And yet we have to have that faith or that courage to take action in the face of uncertainty, right? And I'm going to link this to something else. Again, a paradox, and feel free to talk about something else if this doesn't make sense to you.
No, but I'll say that I'm dying to hear what you say, but I would say, I would encourage anyone to take a risk, but where I see this happening often is with dating. So I have my friends, and they're like, I don't know if they're the one. I don't know. Well, how will you know?
That's right. That's right. How will you know if you don't go out with this person? And actually, this is a great lead-in, and open your heart. Maybe, right? Maybe they don't look like the person you thought you'd be with, but their heart matches yours. Right?
Absolutely. And I married the person that I would never have imagined that they would be the one. So but I sorry I interrupted you.
No, this is how
I'm very passionate about dating, and people,
Well, then let's talk about that for a minute. I was going to ask you about broken hearts and how that lets the light in, but there's also this story. I've told it on the show before. I finally figured out who told it. It was Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. I'm not sure if I said that right. And yes. it is about the soul of a young man seeing the soul of his soulmate, right? His intended, before they incarnate. She is going to be disfigured. he says to whoever you say these things to, the angels, the Holy One, no, let me be disfigured. And then they meet on this planet, and in one story they meet at their wedding, and another they meet while they're dating, and she says, this can't be right. I'm beautiful, and look at you. And he tells her this story, that he chose that. And that moves me over and over again. Do you know that story? Does that line up with your thoughts about dating?
So thank you for teaching me this, and I will educate myself and learn about the story more. I think the reason I mentioned that I care, that I would say maybe care about dating. I don't know if that comes across and makes sense. I'm happily married. I just want to make sure.
Right.
But I care about dating because of my the way I can see people. When they face certain bridges and really people wanting to get this confirmation and assurance and promise that life would go exactly the way they wanted to go, and it doesn't. Fortunately or unfortunately, it goes in beautiful, mysterious, and sometimes painful ways, but it's not exactly the way that you thought it would happen. And I think sometimes when people don't get this reassurance of things going exactly their way, they won't take a one step towards life. And I really believe in taking action and owning your life, again, without taking any unnecessary risk or doing things that are going to harm you, God forbid. So that is something that I find really fascinating in Chassidut, in spiritual Judaism. There's the concept of the longer, shorter way versus the shorter, longer way that we often live life when we try to get there fast. So we often want to get to exactly the place that we want to go fast. And then we don't spend time understanding who we are. What do we need? Why did we arrive to this world? And we all rush. And then what happens? We want to get there fast. But then we face all sorts of obstacles, including ourselves, and we have to course correct again and again. And then what we wanted to be the shorter way is becoming the longer way. And one of the beautiful ways of living potentially more spiritually or with the Jewish wisdom is taking the longer, but eventually shorter way, where you spend time thinking about, where am I going? What am I here to be and do? Am I pleasing too often people? Am I connected? I signed up to study law. I really wanted to please my parents, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to make them so proud. I had no interest in law. I only liked watching Law and Order. That's the only thing I liked connected to law. But I signed up to school, and then the night or a couple of days before I started my first degree in law, I was like, I'm looking at all of these books, these law books. I have zero interest to start a 3, what could become 4 years education. Why am I doing this? I realized I'm doing this to please my parents. They didn't even care. It was the story that I told myself in my head to please, for them to be proud of me. And then I stopped and I pulled myself, and I do have the gift of being, in moments brave. I pulled myself out of law school. I was a waitress for another 6 or 9 months, and I took a minute to think about, what do I want to study? And then I studied gender studies, and I studied sociology, and I studied that thing that I'm passionate about. But how many of us do and go on a certain journey because we wanted to please, we wanted to satisfy, and we're kind of stuck on that journey for many, many, many years.
Right. Wow. You just wrapped so many things together, in that. And again, I'll repeat, you are the grandchild of courage and honesty. But that's what I hear when you speak, and that's what I read in this book. And that you talk about our brokenness, and that, again, this is where the light, I think that's a Jewish saying, isn't it? That's where the light shines through, that
Yes.
the most complete heart is a broken heart. right?
There is
Get that right?
nothing more, exactly, there is
Okay.
nothing more complete than a broken heart. And you can't get to a level of completeness if you are not broken or have been broken.
Wait, can you just say that again? Because it's so powerful.
You can't get to a level of completeness, and this is translation, without being broken or have had the experience of being broken. So if no one has never broken your heart or you haven't broken yourself, you cannot be complete. Because the space between the broken pieces of your heart is where growth happens, internal growth. So if your heart is intact, how are you going to grow it?
So we have to make mistakes. We have to cross narrow bridges. We 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 have we have to act in the face of uncertainty, because that's what opens up our heart and breaks it open.
Sounds like that was the master plan.
Wow. So that open space, and I'm going to shift our conversation again, though first, if you're just tuning in, you have no idea what you've missed. This is the Dr. Alicia Show on KUHS Denver. The stream, you're going to have to listen to the replay. And you can find it on the Dr. Alicia Show. On Facebook, you can find it on elisarobin.com. My guest is Michal Oshman, and she wrote the book, What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? Michal, how do people find you? Besides finding the book on Amazon, if they want you as a speaker somewhere, how do they find you?
Thank you for asking, Dr. Lisa, and I just love this conversation. I can't believe how the time just flew by. I'm on Instagram, I am on TikTok, Michal Oshman, and yeah, you can find me Facebook, all the, LinkedIn, all the social channels. I'm there, and I'm very curious to hear how people are responding to my book, What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? Which is a self-help book that helps people navigate through everyday challenges that all of us are going through, like anxiety and depression and fear and not knowing, not knowing how to facilitate and how to navigate this thing called life.
Right. So we have about 10 minutes left, not quite, but I want to then I want to link the notion of the space, the broken heart, and we grow in those spaces, to tzimtzum, the having to create an opening. Can you make that leap? Can you connect us and talk about tzimtzum?
Yes, and we're talking about these big, holy, huge concepts here on the morning show, right? So, and I know, Dr. Lisa, you're with me. These are like the cornerstone. This is the essence. Yes. Of spiritual Judaism, right? Of Kabbalah, of Zohar, of what makes this Jewish wisdom so meaningful and spiritual. So these are really holy concepts, and what we're trying to do is explain the holy concepts in a way that we can embrace, understand, and hopefully practice them in everyday life. And that's my mission in the book as well, and I know it is yours as well, Dr. Lisa. So one of my favorite concepts in the wisdom, and I know you know this, like my hands were kind of shaking when I was writing about this and publishing this concept of tzimtzum, because it is so holy. Mm-hmm. So the idea of tzimtzum, and this is how I'm explaining it, right? I'm not an educator, I'm not a rabbi or representative. I'm talking to you as a friend, as someone that is on a self development journey, I hope. The idea of tzimtzum is about condensing yourself. Mm-hmm. It's about taking less space for you and making more space for others. And it is inspired by the actions that God took himself, the divine, however you look at the creator, call it what you do, this huge force that created us and created the world. And by the creation of the world, and it's really beautiful because we're having this conversation around the time of celebrating creation, Rosh Hashanah. By the creator's, let's say, decision to create the world, the creator had to take less space for themselves because they were everything. He was everything and everywhere. Mm-hmm. So by the fact that he wanted to create light, water, animals, fish, human, those things, those creatures, they needed space. So then it appeared to us as humans that the creator was taking less space for himself and making more space for us. Mm-hmm. And because we're created, in the image of God, we have an opportunity to do the same in our lives, to at times take less space for us and make more space for others.
I always have the image, and I know Hebrew is a gendered language, and so Hashem ends up being he, and yet the notion of God or Hashem is non-gendered, or both gendered, or many gendered, or something we don't, right? And so if you're listening, I just want to point out that when we say he, it's a gendered language, but we don't actually mean that. We mean Hashem. We mean whatever that is that's bigger than we can explain. Because my image of Tzimtzum is an energy creating like a uterus, like a womb that you build a baby in, you build a universe in, you build something in, and that's a very sort of feminine energy, right?
There is a lot of feminine energy in the Jewish wisdom. Mm-hmm. It's what you feel on a Friday evening before you welcome Shabbat. Mm-hmm. It's the environment in the home. It's the in many ways the opportunity to lead your family as a woman and a mother. There's a lot of strength. Yes. And a lot of joy in celebrating that feminine essence. And I think often people are not aware of that.
I'm always asked, how can you embrace such a patriarchal religion? And I say to people, you don't truly understand it. We don't just have one book. We have many books, and we have many books, and many scholars and ways of thinking about this. And the language in one book is limiting, but the language in the other books is not. And so it's a paradox. You need to come back on the show, because there are so many things I want to talk to you about. We've only got about 4 minutes. I want to read something from your book, if that's okay, and then sort of close with you talking about it. This is in the back of your book. It's the very end. The greatest lesson I learned from Jewish wisdom is that life is not a challenge to be overcome, to be solved. It's an experience to be lived. I am not a problem to be fixed. Neither are you. You are a complex, beautiful human being designed to grow, improve, and become who you were always supposed to be. None of us is here by chance. We are all here for a reason. The world needs us to do something, and finding that purpose is one of our life missions. And I know you can't talk about that in like 2 minutes, but I'm gonna sort of ask you, that encapsulates your entire book for me, that paragraph. I want to know what keeps you inspired in that way of still finding your purpose. What keeps you inspired?
This conversation that we're having, knowing that we are on very different and yet very similar journeys, knowing that there's so much to do in this world, to help repair, to help reassure people, and sharing this message. I thought for years and years that I was damaged forever because of certain things. I thought that I was never going to smile for real, that I will never feel joy. And I didn't feel joy for many years, or at least they felt a very long time. And I was looking outside, and I was looking everywhere and anywhere apart from my own heritage or myself inside. So that gives me a lot of energy. I feel like I'm on a mission. I really want to share with the world the universal Jewish wisdom, which is not religious and doesn't mean anything that you have to change in how you live life. It just gives you a fresh perspective, but yet an ancient perspective. It is tested for thousands of years. It's beautiful, it's inclusive, and it's relevant. And I think that is really inspiring for me to see that today, more than ever, we actually need to learn from the past. We think that it's the first time that we're dealing with the plague. It isn't. We think that it was the first time that we're dealing with this horror. It isn't. And we've overcome events in the past, and this too we will overcome, but we need to strengthen ourselves through that knowledge that this too will be part of our growth journey.
That is so beautiful, and you wrapped it up perfectly on time. If you are welcome back at any time you would like to come back on the show. I'm hoping you see a huge boost in the sales of the book. What would you do if you weren't afraid? You can find it on Amazon and probably lots of other places. Wherever books are sold, it's absolutely amazing. And this has been incredible. You're definitely welcome back. If you've been listening, so if you missed my show, you have no idea what you missed. And you need to listen to it. And perhaps even if you caught it, you need to listen to it again. And I highly recommend this book. I want to thank you for joining me and Michal Ashman on the Dr. Lisa Show on KUHS Denver, The Stream. I'd like to leave you with one last thought. All you need to take away from today is one bit of flame. You are a flame. What inspires you? What did you hear today that will help you keep that flame burning? One little spark, because the spark of everything, whatever you call it, you know the show is spiritually multilingual, Hashem or God or whatever you call it, that spark lives within you. What is one thing you can take from this conversation? Just keep your flame burning. Please, in this 2 weeks, please join me back with Joanne Greenberg. And until then, I ask you to please keep your inner flame burning, stay well, stay curious, and stay inspired.
Thank you. Elisa, it's been Dr. It was amazing, and I will join you again whenever you'll have me. Thank you so much.
This has been amazing. And